let us learn about charges on atoms. Take a look at this atom of sodium. Let us analyze how many protons, how many electrons, and how many neutrons are in this atom. The 11 here is the number of protons. An atom should be electrically neutral, so the number of electrons should also be 11. And if you subtract the number of protons from the mass number, you get the number of neutrons to be 12. Now, let us imagine that this sodium gives out one electron to another atom, loses one electron. Let us now try to understand what will happen to this sodium after losing one electron. It will still have 11 protons because we are only talking about the electrons. And if it still has 11 protons, that means it is still sodium. Only sodium will have 11 protons. Remember, the number of protons are unique. But it has lost one electron, so now it has only 10 electrons. And the number of neutrons will remain unchanged because nothing is happening to neutrons. In chemistry, only electrons participate. The protons do not participate. The neutrons do not participate in conventional chemical reactions. The neutrons only participate in nuclear reactions. So, since the number of protons and the number of neutrons remain unchanged, that means the mass number will remain 23. But how do we show that one electron has been lost? Well, remember, electrons are negatively charged, so we now have -10, and protons are positively charged. We have +11. -10 plus 11 will give us +1. So, anywhere you see that a sodium atom has given out one electron, it will be indicated by a charge of +1 on the sodium. Anytime you see a positive charge on any atom, that atom is trying to communicate to you that it now has more protons than it does electrons. So in the case we have here, we have one extra proton, which is why we have the +1 charge. Let us take a look at one more example. Imagine you have a chlorine atom like this. How many protons do we have? 17 protons. How many electrons? 17 electrons. And how many neutrons? 18 neutrons. If this chlorine gains one electron, what will become of this chlorine? Let us take a look at it. The number of protons, again, will remain unchanged. But now, one electron has been gained, so the number of electrons has ballooned to 18. The number of neutrons also will remain unchanged. So if we were to write the symbol, since it still has 17 protons, only chlorine from the periodic table has 17 protons. The mass number will also remain unchanged because the mass number only tells us about the number of protons and the number of neutrons. But how do we communicate that one electron has been gained? Again, we do a very simple addition here. We have positive 17 protons and we have negative 18 electrons. That should work out to -1, which means this chlorine should carry a charge of -1 to indicate that it has one excess electron than proton. Now, there is one terminology that is very essential that you should know here. Atoms are neutral. We already know that. So when you have an element with a charge on it, can we still call it an atom? No. Charged elements are called ions. But we have two types. We have positive ion and negative ion. Positive ion are called cation, while negative ions are called anions. Remember those terminology. So the meaning of this is this: when an atom loses an electron, it becomes a cation. And when an ion gains electrons, it becomes an anion. Let us practice with some questions on this. Determine the charges of the ions described below. A chromium atom that has lost 3 electrons. Let me bring up a copy of the periodic table. This is chromium. Normally it has 24 protons and 24 electrons. So normally chromium has 24 protons or 24 electrons. But in this question, 3 electrons have been lost, which means we are going to have a charge of +3 because you are now going to have 3 excess protons. Let me rewrite that so that you can see it properly. So that would be the answer to question A. Question B. A sulfur atom that has gained 2 electrons. Again, let me bring up a copy of the periodic table. Sulfur, an atom of sulfur normally has 16 protons and 16 electrons. So normally the symbol of sulfur should be like that. But after gaining 2 electrons, the symbol should become sulfur with a charge of -2. Telling us that we now have 2 extra electrons in the atom. Let us take a look at the third question. An iron atom that has 24 electrons. Let us take a look at the periodic table. Normally, an iron atom should have 26 protons and 26 electrons. So normally, this is what an atom of iron should look like. However, this one is saying that this iron has only 24 electrons, which means 2 electrons must have been lost. And how do we denote that? That means we should have a charge of +2, meaning that 2 electrons have been lost and you have 2 extra protons. And lastly here, a phosphorus atom that has 18 electrons. Again, let us take a look at the periodic table. Normally, a phosphorus atom will have 15 protons and 15 electrons. So normally, that is a phosphorus atom. But if it has 18 electrons, that means the phosphorus atom must have gained 3 electrons. So this will be the symbol. Let us take a look at some more questions. How many protons, electrons, and neutrons are in each of the following? What about this? And let us take a look at this one as well. To answer the question, let us first take a look at AS. AS is arsenic on the periodic table. Arsenic. And normally, arsenic has 33 protons and 33 electrons. So, although it was not indicated on this question, there should be a number 33 here because it is arsenic. Which means we now know the number of protons, 33. And remember, in chemical reactions, the number of protons do not change. We have a charge of -3, which means 3 electrons have been gained. So the number of electrons in this ion would be 36. How many neutrons do we have? We will need to subtract 33 from 75, and that will be 42. Let us take a look at the second question. Again, we need to check the periodic table. This is titanium, Ti. So in the periodic table, titanium has 22 protons. So although it is not indicated, there should be 22 here as the subscript. And that means the number of protons is 22. The charge here is +4, which means that 4 electrons have been lost. So, how many electrons do we have left in this ion of titanium? That will be 18 electrons. And how many neutrons? 22 subtracted from 49 should be 27. So, if you know the symbol, you can find the number of protons, the number of neutrons, and the number of electrons in an atom or an ion.